Coming in at number 10, we have the She-Hulk villain Abominatrix, who surprisingly enough doesn't actually have a connection with the more well-known villain the Abomination, despite apparently being a gender-flipped version of him. Born under the name of Florence Sharples, Florence volunteered for a medical study that involved test subjects being exposed to gamma rays. As a result, Florence became a gamma-mutated creature that was constantly in a state of anger, unable to return to her human form as her rage continued to grow. Eventually, she would come into conflict with She-Hulk and nearly destroy Las Vegas during their ensuing fight, showing that the Abominatrix is not to be messed with. Coming in at number 9, we have Bert Horowitz, aka the super genius villain known as Omnibus. Following an incident in which the leader detonated a gamma bomb inside a small town in the middle of Arizona, a local salesman named Bert Horowitz found himself rapidly becoming more intelligent by the minute, a similar mutation to the villain who had detonated the gamma bomb in the first place. In fact, when the leader was believed to be dead for a time, Bert took the name of Omnibus and replaced the leader's position in his massive spy network, becoming a new foe that the Incredible Hulk would have to deal with until the true leader finally returned to take back what was rightfully his. Coming in at number 8, we have the very unfortunately named Jailbait, aka Jesse Harrison, turned into a gamma mutant during the same gamma bomb event in Arizona that also spawned Omnibus. Jesse not only gained the traditional green skin and enhanced strength, but also possessed the ability to generate psionic blasts and force fields, depending on her level of concentration. And while Jesse's story was recently shown to have ended in tragedy during the Immortal Hulk series, for a long time she stood strong as one of the guardians of the leader's Freehold Paradise, another green Goliath for the Hulk to have to battle. Coming in at number 7, we have the evil Patchwork, a serial killer that somehow manages to be even more depraved than Carnage and Cletus Cassidy combined. Patchwork was one of the very first villains ever faced by Doc Samson, when the Doctor decided to do some solo superheroing and proved to be a worthy opponent. Using the gamma radiation oozing off his body to murder innocent women and make horrific sculptures with them, Patchwork was an incredibly durable and strong foe once he came face to face with a gamma-powered equal, and proved to be a worthy first opponent to be defeated by Doc Samson. Coming in at number 6, we have Tony Masterson, aka Half-Life. Living most of his life as a quiet college professor, Tony's life was forever changed when he accidentally fell victim to a gamma bomb experiment being conducted by S.H.I.E.L.D. The explosion bleached his skin a ghostly green and convinced Tony that he had died and was now a walking corpse. Giving himself the name Half-Life, the villain was a worthy foe for the Hulk after being manipulated by the leader, and had the unique ability to drain the life force of his enemies through touch alone, like some sort of gamma-infused vampire or ghoul. This meant that the Hulk had to be a bit more creative when it came to fighting him, as punching Half-Life would only wind up giving him more power. Coming in at number 5, we have Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, aka the Red Hulk. Now, we did also have this guy on our list about most powerful gamma heroes, but considering how his story started out, he definitely also counts for the villain list. Following the death of his daughter after years of pursuing the Hulk, Ross was manipulated by MODOK and several other supervillains into becoming the Red Hulk, in case his nemesis should ever return from his exile in outer space. Following the Hulk's return and defeat, the new Red Hulk began causing damage across the globe, even getting into a fight with Thor on the moon and causing an earthquake in San Francisco from the sheer force of him jumping back to Earth. All in all, the Red Hulk definitely caused some major destruction. Coming in at number 4, we have Emil Blonsky, aka Abomination. A Croatian spy during the Cold War undercover on the same military base where Bruce Banner became the Hulk, Blonsky was the victim of a second gamma experiment when he foolishly activated the reactor on his own. Transformed into a green creature with claws even deadlier than the Hulk, Blonsky took the name Abomination once he realized he could not return to human form, and his days as an incognito spy were over. Stronger and with a healing factor on par with the Hulk, Abomination is a twisted look at what gamma radiation can do to someone who's already a trained killer. Coming in at number 3, we have Maestro, a twisted and evil version of the Hulk from a possible alternate future, giving himself a new name after conquering what remains of America following a nuclear winter in this dark future. This version of the Hulk has become far stronger than his original gamma green form, with years of sucking up deadly radiation only improving his ferocity and his power. When the real Hulk encountered this warlord version of himself, the only way he was able to finally come out on top was by literally warping the Maestro back in time to be killed by the same gamma bomb that created the Hulk back in the 60s. But even since then, this future version of the Hulk still seems to keep finding ways to return and claim dominion over the world that he claims he deserves to rule. Coming in at number 2, we have Samuel Stearns, aka the Leader. Many people throughout the Marvel universe can claim to be geniuses, but only the Leader has the unbelievably tall skull to seemingly prove it. Born a simple blue-collar American worker until an accident doused him in gamma radiation, Samuel found himself getting the opposite of most other gamma mutates' powers. Instead of becoming incredibly strong, he became incredibly smart, gaining an increased head size as his intellect, ego, and ambition all swelled. No matter how powerful and strong most of the Hulk's enemies may seem, few can compare to the terrifying genius of the Leader when he's fully unleashed, as his plans have nearly destroyed or conquered the world on countless occasions, and have only been able to be stopped by the Hulk and Bruce Banner trying to use his own genius-like intellect. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the most powerful gamma being of all, because he's the source of all of them. That's right, it's the one below all, residing in the very lowest point of reality at the very bottom of the multiverse. The one below all is the ultimate personification of destruction and hate, essentially being the Hulk-esque alter ego of the one above all, the divine creator of the entire Marvel multiverse. The one below all is the source of all gamma radiation, as it uses the energy source to gain access to other worlds across the multiverse, and resurrect gamma-related beings if they die after becoming connected to the one below all. Even with all of the crazy additions to the Hulk's mythology in the past few years, the one below all is perhaps the greatest, most powerful addition of all time. And who knows what the future holds for the creator of Gamma itself.
Coming in at number 10, we have the evil sorcerer Watan. One of the arch enemies of the classic DC hero Dr. Fate, Watan is a green-skinned magic wielder that has managed to fight Dr. Fate over the ages by constantly reincarnating themselves into a new body and form after each defeat, seemingly incapable of having their spirit totally destroyed. Originally a woman from the Stone Age who had trained in black magic, and also rumored to be connected to a Viking goddess, Watan is one of the oldest villains throughout all of DC Comics history, and will likely continue to be a magical thorn in Dr. Fate's side for the rest of time. Coming in at number 9, we have Eclipso, the former Wrath of God. A supernatural agent of chaos with his face permanently in the shade of a constant eclipse, Eclipso claimed to be the one who carried out the biblical flood of Noah's Ark, and that he was replaced in his position as the physical embodiment of God's wrath by the Spectre because Eclipso was simply too violent and angry for the role. Older than almost every other being on Earth, Eclipso has fought many heroes over the years, and even though he no longer possesses the power of a full god, he is still an extremely dangerous magical being, and who knows what he'll try to do next to regain his godly power. Coming in at number 8, we've got Black Adam. Born 5,000 years ago as a slave in the country of Kahndaq, Adam was gifted the powers of all the gods, similarly to how Billy Batson would be several millennia later. However, after freeing himself and the other slaves, Adam wasn't content to lead a life of peace, instead choosing to become the violent leader of Kahndaq and ruling with an iron fist. Horrified at the destruction being caused by his powers, the wizard Shazam within the Rock of Eternity sealed away Black Adam for thousands of years, choosing to wait for a more suitable heir to all of his power. Of course, once Black Adam was unleashed once again by the research of Dr. Sivana, he was dead set on getting back the position of power that he believes Billy Batson has unjustly stolen from him. Coming in at number 7, we have the Enchantress, and to be more specific, we're talking about the Enchantress known as June Moon from the DC universe, and not the Enchantress from Marvel's Thor comics, although honestly, either Enchantress could probably earn a spot on this list. In this case, the Enchantress is a dark magical personality that was awakened within the young artist June Moon, transforming her physically into a magic-wielding sorceress whenever she chooses to call upon its power, or during moments of great emotional turmoil. And while June herself likely doesn't count as a supervillain given that she generally wants what's best for everyone, but the actual Enchantress entity, she's a being of pure destruction and only June's strength of will is capable of holding her back. Coming in at number 6, we have the Marvel entity known as Nightmare. One of the Fear Lords, a group of demons that gain their power from human suffering and misery, Nightmare has been a longtime villain of Doctor Strange and any other Marvel hero that dares to wander into the magical realm of sleep. Capable of bringing any sleeping person's astral form into his Nightmare realm, Nightmare is one of the few Marvel villains that relies almost entirely on mental manipulation and tricks, as he's much weaker if he's ever brought into the physical waking world. Even with this limitation, Nightmare is a ruthless foe, and is always searching for another way to bring everyone in existence into his dark world of fitful slumber. Coming in at number 5, we've got another Marvel demon with the infamous Mephisto. Perhaps best known for being behind the One More Day event that saw Spider-Man's marriage with Mary Jane Parker get wiped from the timeline, Mephisto is one of the closest things that the Marvel Universe has to a Satan character, and uses humanity's belief in a devil to inspire even more fear in his powers. Extremely powerful and considered a Class 2 demon, Mephisto often finds himself in conflict with some of the more magical or even cosmic heroes of this universe, although his preferred method of work is manipulating events from afar. And with Mephisto having recently become a major player in Spider-Man lore again, as the true reasoning behind his obsession with Peter Parker's marriage is slowly being revealed, we definitely haven't seen the last of the Marvel Universe's devil. Coming in at number 4, we have Baron Mordo. A student of the mystical Ancient One for decades before Dr. Stephen Strange even injured his hands, Baron Karl Mordo was long suspected by the Ancient One as having an impure heart, but nevertheless was taught magic as a potential next Sorcerer Supreme. However, Mordo's ambitions for power were too great and he was banished from the Ancient One's sanctum for contacting the dread entity called Dormammu. With Dr. Stephen Strange being trained in his place as a Sorcerer Supreme, specifically to stop any future plans of Mordo's, the Baron embraced his role as a magical villain and has been a persistent enemy of Strange and his allies ever since. Coming in at number 3, we have the demonic Trigon the Terrible. Hailing from the dimension of Azarath, Trigon is best known as being the evil father of Raven, one of the key members of the Teen Titans. Born from the darkness shed from humanity inside his own dimension, Trigon sought to have a child tethering him to the earthly realm, and thus seduced Raven's mother while in an angelic disguise. With Raven having become a hero determined to use her magic to fight against her father's wishes, Trigon has become one of the largest threats the Teen Titans, or even the rest of the DC universe, have ever faced, and in recent years has been building up a new army from within his hellish dimension. Coming in at number 2, we have the Lord of Dread himself, Dormammu. The true nemesis of Dr. Stephen Strange, Dormammu is literally millions of years old, and born from a realm of pure magic before eventually conquering the vast expanse known as the Dark Dimension, a reality without time, and combined his own magic with that of the entire Dark Realm. With the Baron Mordo acting as his earthly disciple, Dormammu has long wished to conquer Earth and expand his domain, with only the efforts of Doctor Strange having been successful in holding him back so far. With his magic even being powerful enough to alter the spells of Odin the Allfather, Dormammu is one of the most powerful magical beings in the entire Marvel multiverse. But hold that thought though, because finally coming in at our top spot, we have the infamous Victor Von Doom. Now, when you think of Doctor Doom, you might think of his more scientist-esque depictions in the movies, or his many uses of technology in the comics as the leader of Latveria, such as his army of Doombots. However, the true danger of Doctor Doom is in his utilization of both technology and magic together, as the Fantastic Four's nemesis has long been a powerful sorcerer alongside his technical genius and power as the leader of a country. Introduced Introduced to the mystical arts by his own mother, Doom has proven to be so adept at magic that he was even briefly considered as a potential Sorcerer Supreme. However, given that he often uses his magic for kinda evil purposes, it's probably for the best if Dr. Doom just remains a doctor for the time being.
Number 10, Crim Lord. He might not be one of the most powerful on this list, but I've been really loving the Doom Patrol series so far. I have to get caught up on season 3 personally, but wow, did that series get me super invested in this team. At one point, one of the enemies they face is former teammate Mento, aka Steve Dayton in the show. In the show, we learned Steve Dayton and Rita Farr, who some might know in the comics as Elastigirl, used to date. In fact, in the comics, Steve and Rita were even married. Just like in the show where Mento appears to be both ally and misguided enemy to the team, in the comics, Dayton was also a criminal at one point, becoming the villain known as Crim Lord. His plan in the comics involved framing Deathstroke for murder and placing nuclear bombs the world over, threatening pretty much the entire Earth cause nuclear bombs. In the end, he was defeated and would become a hero once more. Mento gets his powers from his Mento helmet, which increases the strength of his otherwise low-level psionic abilities. With his helmet, he becomes both telepathic and telekinetic, can fly, and can even control the minds of others. Number 9, Gorilla Grod. One of Gorilla Grod's main powers was his force of mind. He was able to use his mind to manipulate the thoughts and senses of others, and he could also use it to take control of people and bend them to his will, or even take their form for himself. Being that Gorilla Grod is also quite intelligent, he has also found ways to even influence others into adoring him. Back in the New Earth continuity, Grod once devised a plan to win the heart of the gorilla lady that he loved by making his body emanate a neo-magnetic force that made him instantly liked by those who made his acquaintance, gorilla or human. He succeeded in wooing his lady love, and later would use the same acquired power to influence the people of Central City, almost becoming governor and plotting to use his influence to become the president of the United States thereafter, if he succeeded. Of course, Flash ended up figuring out what was going on and foiled Grod's plans before they could bear fruit. So no President Grod for us. Sad. I want to see that plan come to fruition. Unless that's already happened and I somehow missed it, but I don't think so. Number 8, Annihilation. Annihilation is the entity that is believed to be a demonic god. It rules over the Amenthi demon army and is typically attracted to those who are strong enough to defeat it, or defeat its current host, at least. Whoever beats Annihilation must then take its golden helm up for themselves. Wearing the golden helm of Annihilation basically gives you control over the Amenthi army, somewhat, but at the expense of ruling over yourself fully, as it bends you to its will. This is how Annihilation tricked and gained control of Genesis, Apocalypse's wife, who ruled over Arakko and its mutants. She managed to beat Annihilation in battle, only to realize too late that the fight had kind of been a trick. She became the new Annihilation and was forced to merge together the forces of Amenth and of Arakko, becoming the new leader of both groups. Refusing to do so would have meant the Amenthi demons would have been left to run wild, as they would have no guide and no leader, and would then have certainly destroyed the mutants of Arakko otherwise. So Genesis was in a hard place. She was like, I guess I kind of got to do it to save my people, but also then I'm going to kind of lose myself because I'm going to become Annihilation. Dang. Number 7, Brother Blood. Brother Blood is a pretty terrifying villain, to be honest. His mind control comes from accessing his victim's blood, and through getting their blood, there is a whole slew of powers he can exert over you. Brother Blood in the current continuity can use the blood of his enemies to heal, rip open teleportation portals, and even project energy. Oh, and he also gains the powers of those whose blood he has tasted. And of course, once he has your blood, he can also use it to control you, bending you to his will and making you do his bidding. Not only does that mean you're in danger of losing your own free will if you go up against him, but it also means that you have to deal with all of his servants who have already kind of surrendered and are puppeted by him. He also happens to be a weirdly likable guy, so it's pretty easy for him to attract even willing followers who he can then use much more easily as pawns for his own evil plots. And they're all like, yes, we like the blood, the Church of Blood. Number 6, Purple Man. Although Purple Man sometimes can be seen as having a bit of a weakness when it comes to his power set or when it comes to just certain people he comes up against, Kilgrave is still pretty off the charts when it comes to all that he has achieved and is capable of. He can easily influence his opponents to do whatever he wishes simply by suggesting them to do it. However, it's also been implied that his powers can only work when his target can actually audibly hear his command. Now, if this were true, that would make him weaker. But in reality, in the comics anyways, Kilgrave's powers are actually pheromone based, which means he simply has to be in the vicinity for you to become a helpless victim of his. And if you couldn't hear him, you'd probably still do what he wanted you to do. In the Jessica Jones Netflix series, David Tennant played Kilgrave, and that show really showed just how much of a monster and a powerhouse this villain can be. At one point, Dr. Doom even managed to use Kilgrave's power to rule the world. And at another point in time, in another reality, I guess I should say, Purple Man actually does rule the world. And that's what actually comes about creating the 1602 universe, because he tries to get rid of the people that would basically rise up against him, putting them in 1602, and then everything gets wonky there. And Purple Man alone is apparently capable of controlling over 100 people at a time by himself. So yeah, that's a lot. Number 5, Emma Frost. Emma Frost is one of the most powerful mutant telepaths in the Marvel Universe. Actually, hold that. One of the most powerful telepaths, period, in the Marvel Universe, mutant or not. She has given the likes of Professor Charles Xavier a run for his money and has managed to duke it out psionically with mental heavyweights like Jean Grey. The only reason we are ranking her so low for a villain who possesses powerful mind control abilities is because she's really more of a hero these days. But she did start out as a villain in the comics, and it's important to remember that with Emma. In fact, that's a big part of what makes her such an interesting and compelling character, I think, today. Emma can influence a person's thoughts, manipulate them to do what she wants, and even alter their memories. In her days as a villain, she definitely used her powers to make others do her bidding, even compelling her victims to kill at her behest. Emma as a villain is scary. Emma would be more scary as a villain today, too. I kind of want Emma to be a villain again for a little bit. I just feel like she's a great hero, but she's also a great villain. I don't know. She's just great. The end. Number 4, Zenu. Zenu is also known as the Living Hulk and is a being that uses hypnosis powers to take control of others' minds. On more than one occasion, he has attempted to use these powers to conquer Earth and bend the minds of its entire populace to his will. In fact, while he's also attempted this feat in the pages of Immortal Hulk, this was also something he tried in his very first appearance. Back then, he was trying to mind control the human race in order to get them to build him a ship to return him home. Doesn't sound like such an evil plan, until you realize the force of the ship that he'd have the Earth build would actually rip it asunder once it took off and destroy it completely, due to the great force needed for it to launch. Number 3, Maxwell Lord. Maxwell Lord's power set has changed over time, but the fact remains that when it comes to taking control or influencing others in the DC universe, he's pretty much one of the best. He has taken control of the minds of some of the most powerful heroes in DC, such as Superman and Martian Manhunter. And because his powers have fluctuated over his history as a character, so have his power levels, with him at one point being able to extend his telepathic reach to manipulate the minds of billions at a time on Earth. Pretty crazy stuff. In the DCEU in Wonder Woman 1984, Maxwell Lord was a failed businessman who gained the power to grant others wishes, and through that amassed power for himself, besides with said wish granting also being kinda like a monkey's paw that generally came with some kind of catch or negative aspect. However, in the comics, Maxwell Lord doesn't even need an artifact to control the minds of others, which makes him even more deadly. And even if he didn't have like powers, he's still like super charismatic and persuasive, so he could probably just convince you to do what he wants you to do just by like being all smooth and charming. Number 2, Onslaught. Onslaught is one of the most powerful telepathic and telekinetic minds we've ever seen our Marvel heroes face. At one point, he threatened the existence of most of the superpowered heroic community in Marvel and seemingly killed a lot of them, and that was because he was basically threatening the entire world. Fortunately, they were rescued by young Franklin Richards and his reality warping powers. Onslaught is an entity created out of the combined minds of Professor Charles Xavier and Magneto that was created when Xavier broke Magneto's mind, seemingly wiping it but actually taking part of it into himself. Merging with his own suppressed dark emotions, Onslaught was created. While Onslaught is most powerful in many ways, the entity can also implant ideas ideas in the minds of even the strongest telepaths, encouraging them to do his bidding as he sees fit, though generally he seems to prefer to strong-arm people for the most part when push comes to shove. He has like a lot of like psychic abilities, but I feel like he's also just like telekinetically like, I'll just punch you into outer space. Number 1, Staro the Conqueror. Staro can literally conquer entire worlds and actually has done that before. And on more than one occasion, they have also almost conquered Earth as well. Staro is a giant space starfish who in their first appearance took on the first formation of the Justice League in The Brave and the Bold issue number 28, where they threatened to, you guessed it, conquer the world. While in the Suicide Squad film, Staro the Conqueror was a cruel nickname given to Staro by the Thinker, who is in charge of the experimentation on that imprisoned alien, that poor imprisoned alien. In the comics, it was a name earned by Staro because they had conquered so many worlds already. Staro basically creates lots of smaller starfish babies or spores, which can then latch onto individuals and take over their minds. In the Suicide Squad, this is made even more horrifying, as to be controlled by a Staro baby also means that you are now dead and basically just a husk. But in the comics, possibly even more terrifying still than that prospect is the revelation that Staro doesn't need to get one of their babies on you to control you. They can also do that through infecting your subconscious, or in more recent incarnations, just with their willpower. No babies or spores needed. Although fortunately in the comics, if a baby or a spore attaches to you, doesn't mean you're dead. You can still come back.
Coming in at number 10 as a bit of an honorable mention is the Batman Who Laughs. Now, the reason this villain is only getting an honorable mention is because he's relatively new and has had a huge amount of publicity in the few years since his creation. But I still do think this character deserves some more exploration further down the road. As a twisted combination of Bruce Wayne and the Joker from the Dark Multiverse, the Batman Who Laughs was an incredibly intimidating villain that only got even more powerful when he gained the powers of Dr. Manhattan and became the Darkest Knight. But seeing as how he was then killed by God Mode Wonder Woman, and I do think that the Batman Who Laughs deserves a comeback in the near future so that we can see what really happens when the true Batman and the Batman Who Laughs go head to head. Coming in at number 9, we have Owlman, the evil opposite of Batman from Earth 3. Born under the name of Thomas Wayne Jr., as a young boy, Owlman murdered his younger brother Bruce and had his butler Alfred kill his parents to ensure that the Wayne fortune was not wasted by their frivolous spending. Using his costumed identity as Owlman to intimidate the leaders of Gotham into falling under his control, Owlman was a twisted version of everything that Batman stood for, and every time their universes have crossed over has led to some incredibly dramatic battles. And with the DC Omniverse recently having become a lot more open than it was during the New 52 era, it's only a matter of time before Owlman and Batman are trying to outwit one another once more. Coming in at number 8, we have the malicious psychologist known as Hugo Strange. One of Batman's oldest villains, originally debuting only 9 issues after the Caped Crusader himself in Detective Comics, Professor Hugo Strange was also one of the very first villains to ever figure out his secret identity as Bruce Wayne. While initially depicted as a typical mad scientist stereotype, using a weather machine to hide his minions' robberies with a thick layer of fog, more recent interpretations of the character have seen him as a devious manipulator, using his position of power as a doctor of psychology to examine the criminals of Arkham Asylum and scheming to gain power in Gotham City. It's this emphasis on mental ability rather than actual superpowers that makes Hugo Strange such an interesting villain to deal with, and why he definitely deserves to come back in a major Batman storyline. Coming in at number 7, we have the intelligent zombie, Solomon Grundy. Inspired by a 19th century English nursery rhyme, Solomon Grundy was born centuries ago as a wealthy merchant, but after being murdered and having his body dumped in a swamp with mystical properties, he's now cursed to constantly be resurrected with slightly different properties each time. Usually being depicted as an incredibly physically strong zombie, Grundy is also incredibly resilient to both magic and physical damage, meaning that every time he's faced by either Batman or Superman, they need to figure out a clever new way to defeat him. Solomon Grundy has always been a dependable muscle for other villains throughout the years, but it would be nice to see him take more of a starring role in an upcoming Batman story. Coming in at number 6, we have Catman. Yep, that's not a typo, there's an actual Batman villain named Catman, and we'd love to see more of him in the comics as he continues to walk the fine line between villain and anti-hero. Born under the name Thomas Blake, Catman was initially a famous lion trapper that decided a life of crime was a better use of his peak human abilities, and even based his initial costume on that of the already established villain Catwoman. However, after years of being thwarted by Batman and becoming mocked by other supervillains, Catman reformed himself after some time in the jungle into becoming an anti-hero, and was most recently seen working alongside the Suicide Squad. With all of this character development making him more than just a joke character, Catman definitely deserves to face off against Batman once more. Coming in at number 5, we have Mr. Bloom, the plant-based villain. With the ability to plant seeds within people that would grant them incredible superpowers but at the cost of their lifespan, Mr. Bloom threw Gotham into chaos during a period where Bruce Wayne was unable to be Batman and Commissioner James Gordon had instead taken up the cape and cowl. The coolest thing about Mr. Bloom wasn't just the unique look of his powers and his visual design, but how they were able to manipulate the people and villains of Gotham into a new status quo so easily. Seeing this villain have a rematch with Bruce Wayne, or even get to interact more with the similarly plant-based Poison Ivy, seems like an obvious choice for a comeback, and I can't wait to see what this villain does next. Coming in at number 4, we have Prometheus. While not an alternate reality version of Bruce Wayne like several other villains on this list, Prometheus is still a dark reflection of the Batman, given that he had to watch his criminal parents be gunned down Bonnie and Clyde style by Gotham City police forces. Waging war against law enforcement and justice of any kind, Prometheus is made all the deadlier with his helmet that allows him to download fighting skills directly into his brain. It's this deadly combo of physical prowess and ideological differences that make Prometheus one of the more interesting Bat villains, and someone who definitely needs to be featured more often. Coming in at number 3, we have the iconic Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face. Originally fighting for the side of justice with Bruce Wayne as Gotham's district attorney, Harvey Dent's mind was split in two following an acid attack that scarred exactly one half of his face. Making all of his decisions through a coin flip based on his past childhood trauma, Two-Face is one of the most well-known villains of Batman, but hasn't gotten a chance in recent years to really headline an event as a villain, usually only taking the focus in smaller storylines or as a supporting character. Personally, I think Two-Face is long overdue to take his place as a master of the criminal underworld. Coming in at number 2, we have Bruce Wayne's former childhood friend and current adulthood enemy, Hush. Born under the name of Thomas Elliot, Hush as a child was one of the first people to inspire Bruce on his road to becoming Batman. However, Thomas Elliot was a deranged child, wishing to have his family's fortune for himself and killing both of his parents to have it. After traveling the world and training to become a warrior, Hush adopted his supervillain persona and allied himself with the Riddler to rid the world of Bruce Wayne, organizing many of his enemies and even allies against him. And while the villain has appeared several times since, it's been a while since we've truly gotten to see the master manipulator Hush at work. And finally, coming in at our top spot, we have the Phantasm, aka Andrea Beaumont. Originally debuting in the animated film Batman: Mask of the Phantasm, Andrea Beaumont was Bruce Wayne's first love, the girl he almost considered abandoning his mission as Batman for before the mission had even begun. Unfortunately for Bruce, Andrea and his relationship was forced to an end by the death of her father, causing Andrea to begin her descent into becoming the vengeful spirit known known as the Phantasm. As a villain with an incredibly cool design and a very personal connection to Batman, the Phantasm has been only recently seen in the comics, and definitely takes my top pick for the villain that most deserves another storyline.
And at 10, Sin Eater. Stanley Carter's parents were addicts who ended up falling in love with each other. Stanley's father, though, later died, leaving Stanley's mother pregnant and alone. Stanley's mother was sent to a rehabilitation clinic, and Stanley went to be raised by his grandparents in the Ozark Mountains. Stanley's grandfather was a zealous pastor who reveled his son and took it out on Stanley. After Stanley's grandfather died due to a rattler bite, this congregation held a sin-eating ritual for him, and young Stanley presumably saw a Sin Eater, a masked hermit who would eat fruit placed in the corpse of someone's body to take the dead sins for himself, because you know that's not gonna screw up a child's development. Stanley ended up joining the NYPD and became a detective after growing up, having multiple instances of executing criminals, particularly drug traffickers, including his own partner. This is where he really became the Sin Eater, a maniacal serial killer and probably one of Spider-Man's scariest foes with no powers, but with the MO of killing anyone who sins. The Sin Eater's first victim was actually his own lover, police captor Jean DeWolf, whose death attracted attention throughout all New York City, including their friend Spider-Man. The Sin Eater had stolen DeWolf's purse, creating a precedent of taking one personal object for each of his victims, and this object would usually have to be associated with the victim's sin in some way. It's probably going to be a loose way, but yeah. And at 9, Atrocity. Introduced and only seen in the Spider-Man game Spider-Man Edge of Time from 2011, Atrocity was created after Anti-Venom went into a blind rage, accidentally knocked Otto Octavius and Walker Sloan into Walker Sloan's gateway. It was like a time gateway. The three fused in the space-time continuum. I tried getting Taylor to put this on a list for ages, so I'm gonna put it here because holy damn, this is one hell of a villain that I want to see come back. Atrocity would occasionally attack Peter Parker or Miguel O'Hara with its teleporting tentacles throughout their journey in Alchemax's building, until it eventually revealed itself and attacked Peter Parker. Atrocity was defeated but would later appear again, attempting to kill Peter Parker at the same time the CEO was fighting Miguel O'Hara. Peter manipulated Atrocity into attacking electrified pillars, stunning it. Peter took this opportunity to remove those tentacles and send them through the time gateway. These tentacles were also used to drain the Alchemax CEO of his powers. After both Atrocity and the CEO, who is revealed to be Peter Parker, were vulnerable, they were knocked into the gateway together simultaneously, resetting the timeline. This absolute monstrosity is able to teleport through time and space, in addition to all of his other powers. So yeah, Atrocity for sure needs to make a comeback. I want to see this guy. He only appeared once. He's probably one of the most horrifying looking villains of all time. Please. And at 8, Mr. Negative. Martin Lee was a seemingly good-willed philanthropist who ran a volunteer soup kitchen called Feast, where May Parker volunteered, because of course she did. While he was also the crime boss of Chinatown, Mr. Negative. Despite being a crime lord, Lee was seemingly a kind and generous man. The Feast project displayed healing powers for people of various illnesses, although the cause of this healing was actually unknown, but it turned out to be Lee himself. The public knows that the person known as Martin Lee was an illegal Chinese immigrant who attempted to travel to America to be with his wife. In China, he ran a factory, but because of his lack of resources to bribe the Communist Party, he could not develop his business and grew tired of that country. Although this Martin Lee is not actually Martin Lee, but a former smuggler who just used Lee's identity after he died. Mr. Negative first came into conflict with Spider-Man when he made a power play towards taking control of New York's criminal underworld by attempting to wipe out all existing members of the Carnage and Magia crime families, using a DNA-specific bioweapon called Devil's Breath. Mr. Negative is also responsible for the creation of Anti-Venom, and while he was featured in the 2018 Spider-Man game, it's been like 3 years, so he needs to show up again. And at 7, The Spot. As a scientist working for the Kingpin, Dr. Owen was assigned to reproduce the radiation levels of the Vigilante cloak to find a way to artificially mimic his powers. Working late one night, he actually succeeded, creating a solid black circular portal. In doing so, however, the drain on the city's power became so great a blackout washed over the city, causing the portal to shimmer and destabilize. Fearful of losing a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, Owen stepped into it, which was a horrible idea. The power shortage caused the portal to send him into a different dimension, a place of half darkness and half light, kinda like my mind. When Owen emerged back in his lab, his body had undergone a radical transformation. The portals from the other dimension had adhered to his skin, covering him from head to toe in black spots. But just think about how crazy OP this villain is, alright? He has the ability to control these portals. Like, if the man wanted to decapitate you, instantly he could. Best doctor in a sense, I guess. That's still horrifying. The Spider-Man in the 90s cartoon would use these portals against Ohm, but if he had just decided that he wanted to just destroy him, he could have. And Spider-Man would have had nothing to do. So, yeah, I want to see him make an appearance again, somehow. And at 6, SpiderSide. SpiderSide is a more obscure and odd Spider-Man villain, but I still think he would be pretty badass. Being first introduced as SpiderSide in New Warriors number 61, this version of Peter Parker is one of the clones made by Dr. Miles Warren, because we all know how much we love clones, which is an entirely separate villain that caused the whole clone debacle and creation of Scarlet Spider and a whole lot of other things. What's notable about SpiderSide, however, is not only him having all of Spider-Man's powers, but also the ability to stretch and warp his body at will, similar to Mr. Fantastic. SpiderSide is certainly deadly as well, helping Jackal to release a virus in Springfield, Pennsylvania, resulting in the deaths of 2,600 people. But either way, SpiderSide, with all the abilities of Spider-Man and Mr. Fantastic, makes him pretty damn powerful, so I want to see him come back. And they didn't do much with him, okay? And I like the name SpiderSide. Any evil Spider-Man, really, just bring me more. Halfway through into number 5, Red Goblin. After the collapse of S.H.I.E.L.D., the Carnage symbiote was secured in the Lockbox, a privately run vault at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Agents Crane and Coleman infiltrated the Lockbox and stole the symbiote, delivering it to their employer, Norman Osborn. Yeah, you see where this is going. After receiving the symbiote, Osborn bonded with it to become the new Carnage, hoping that it would be the key to regaining his Green Goblin persona. While the symbiote initially seized control of him, Norman offered to teach it more nuanced and sadistic ways to kill, an offer that the symbiote eagerly accepted. The fact that you know more sadistic ways to kill people than a freaking mad symbiote is a whole other topic though, dude. The symbiote turned over control to its new host, restoring his appearance and purging his body of the nanites, preventing him from augmenting himself with Goblin formula. Osborn used the symbiote to kill Phil Urich, and after pretending to be mortally wounded in a rematch against Spider-Man as the Green Goblin, unveiled his new partner by transforming into the monstrous Red Goblin. Osborn used the symbiote to great effect, incapacitating Spider-Man's allies and loved ones, and bonding a portion of the symbiote to his grandson to turn him into the new Goblin child. Spidey was only able to defeat Red Goblin by taunting Osborn, saying that killing him would only give Carnage the credit and not him, which caused Osborn to remove the symbiote from himself. So he couldn't defeat Red Goblin, he had to defeat Osborn. Yeah, this is one of my favorite Carnage versions, so I want to see this come back, please. Like the next Venom movie. Or a No Way Home. And at number 4, Demo Goblin. After losing fights with Spider-Man and the Green Goblin, Jason Philip Macendale Jr., aka Hobgoblin, took advantage of the Inferno Crisis by following several demons back to their lair and confronting their demonic lord Natshir. Macendale wanted enough power to defeat his enemies, and offered his soul to the demon in exchange for such power. When the demon stopped laughing, he decided that Macendale's effort was worth something even if his soul wasn't, and he had him possessed. This gave Macendale the physical strength that he craved, coupled with superhuman speed and endurance. Unfortunately, I guess you could say for him at least, the demon who possessed him proved to be incompatible, and the two fought many a battle for control over Macendale's physical form until the demon literally ripped himself out of his human host and began a separate existence as the Demogoblin, a form of anti-hero in a sense who would kill anyone who has sinned, which is basically everyone. Except he would stay away from children, even dying to protect one. Getting close to the end in at number 3, Shocker. Okay, he's not really a forgotten villain, but Herman Schultz's parents died when his younger brother Marty was a boy. From a young age, Schultz turned to a life of crime, and soon realized that he wasn't really good at it, having been arrested several times. After one particular robbery gone wrong, Herman was arrested again, but was sent to the prison workshop, where he used the resources around him to build projects and build gauntlets that sent out shock waves which quickly opened safes as well, giving him a much needed one-up on the authorities. Now, I know what you're thinking, okay? Why am I talking about Shocker? Everyone knows who he is. Well, have you seen the MCU version of this guy? Okay, we need a better one. Come on, give me an actual Shocker. Shocker has the ability to shock his enemies with his handheld vibro shock units, but because the vibrations were so fierce, he has to wear a heavily insulated suit, which kind of looks like a mattress, but still. During his first outing as the self-styled Shocker, he ran into and defeated Spider-Man. Plus, I mean, he's the Shocker, I shock people. Give me a better version, okay? With a seemingly minute introduction into the MCU, I want to see a better version. Do it! Penultimately, in at number 2, The Swarm. Fritz von Meyer was once a fascist scientist, the details of which remain unrevealed. But von Meyer fled Germany at the end of World War II to settle in South America. A work expert on toxic poisons and apiculture, which is beekeeping, he continued his research on the breeding patterns of killer bees. One day, he found a hive unlike any other he had ever seen. The bees exhibited no fear and were unusually passive, and seemed to have a highly developed sense of intelligence. Believing that a nearby meteorite bombardment had somehow mutated these bees, von Meyer built a device that he hoped would reawaken the bees' killer instincts so that they could serve him. However, when they were no longer passive, they began to swarm all over von Meyer, killing him. In the midst of his death though, his consciousness was shredded, dissipating into the swarms of bees. Thus, von Meyer became an aggregate being, like a living embodiment of the swarm. Kind of like Spider's Man, but with bees. This is probably one of the weirdest but most fascinating villains I've ever seen, and certainly deserves a comeback. However, not as much as number 1, but I gotta admit, being named Fritz and then having your agony possess a whole load of bees, that's getting too close to FNAF for me, okay? I don't like it. Finally, in at number 1, Spider Carnage. We all knew this was going to be on the list, at least if you know me and my favorite Spider-Man villains. However, Spider Carnage isn't just a Spider-Man villain, he's an alternate version of Spider-Man. Hailing from one of the many Earths, this character was introduced in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, my favorite Spider-Man animated series, might I add. This Peter's life was actually very similar to the main Spider-Man, except this version also lost Aunt May and developed a resentment for humanity. And then he had to deal with a clone, which definitely sucked. Until he and the clone learned that the one who they thought was the clone, who was going by Ben Reilly at the time, could actually be the real Peter Parker, and that broke this Peter. A Carnage symbiote from another universe actually sensed this hatred and resentment, and through a portal created by Jonathan Ohm, it bonded with this Peter, driving him even more insane, and then started calling himself Spider Carnage. From my understanding, this character hasn't been seen since that final episode of the series, and I want him to make a comeback. Please, add this character to the MCU. Like, if we're getting 3 Spider-Man, why not just throw Carnage from some other universe in there too, and then have him bond with like Toby's, because apparently Toby's a bad person now. Even though I'm dressed like the Spider-Man 3 version, yes, that's exactly why I wore this suit today. Specifically for that reason, but yeah. And at 10, Baron Blood. Lord John Falsworth was the youngest of 2 sons of Lord William Falsworth, one of the wealthiest members of the British aristocracy in late Victorian and Edwardian times. John left embittered when his older brother Montgomery inherited the title and the bulk of his estate upon William's death, shortly before World War I. Eventually, Falsworth sought the castle Dracula in Romania in order to find and control the Dracula as a means of achieving immense wealth and power. However, Falsworth fell victim to Dracula's hypnotic powers because, you know, he's a vampire, and was turned into a vampire himself. Dracula bid Falsworth to return to England to wreak havoc upon the country that had repulsed him earlier. Although Falsworth's activities remained largely unrevealed during this time, at some point he again offered his services to the emerging fascist regime in Germany. That's right, folks. We gotta... can't really say it. German scientists performed painful experiments which enabled him to avoid his vulnerability to direct sunlight, and during World War II, German intelligence once again sent Falsworth to England to continue a new reign of terror. Wonderful. And at 9, Batman. Bruce Wayne died when the vigilante Batman was turned into a vampire. With now only one side of his dual life to take care of, the vampire haunts the nights, frightening and biting criminals. With most of the vampires being destroyed, Batman confronted Dracula and killed him by impaling the ancient vampire on a tree that was destroyed by lightning. However, the victory came at a cost, because during the fight Dracula successfully drained the last of Batman's blood, destroying his humanity. Nonetheless, Batman retained his sense of self and assured Alfred that only Bruce Wayne had died, the Batman will live on. And thanks to his new vampiric powers, he would be able to protect Gotham City forever. Because, you know, immortality. Not only that though, but then Batman went on to turn the other Justice League members into vampires. Batman lost his supernatural companion of a vampirized Catwoman when she took a fatal crossbow bolt that was aimed at him. Overcome with rage over the death of the only person able to control his bloodlust, Batman killed the Joker and drained all his blood, which only led to more draining. And at 8, Zarus. Zarus is the son of Dracula. Angry with humanity, encroaching into vampire territory, and unhappy with his founder's leadership, Zarus created a secret alliance with the leaders of various vampire sects. The Claw sect, which was warriors, the Charnaputra sect, Mysticos sect, Nosferatu sect, Atlantean sect, the Moshka sect, and the Siren sect, all to overthrow his father. He accomplished this at the Centennial Meeting of the Vampires. Yeah, they have a meeting every 100 years. He and his allies drove stakes into Dracula and cut his head off, and his allies, like Mysticos, invented devices which cancelled the frequencies of light that were harmful to vampires. So Zarus decided to use these devices to create a new, more dominant place in the world for vampires. He gave these devices to his allies so they could stage a raid on Krieger sect's fortress, eliminating their senior leadership. A vampire with devices that cancel out what the vampire's weaknesses are? No thanks. In at number 7, Harkon Volkihar. Lord Volkihar is actually the main antagonist of the Elder Scrolls V Skyrim's DLC Dawnguard's main storyline. This vampire lord is not only a vampire, but he can also shapeshift into a vampire lord form that gives him a boost to all of his abilities and magics. Lord Volkihar once read a prophecy about a bow that could blot out the sun permanently, causing Skyrim to be a land free for vampires to roam. But to complete this prophecy, he needs Auriel's bow, which is technically also known as Akatosh's bow, since Auriel is just the elven name for Akatosh, and a daughter of Cold Harbor, which is a pure-blooded vampire made by the Daedric Lord Molag Bal after a, let's call it a ritual. This nearly came to fruition when you brought him both the bow and his own daughter before your final battle, so if you didn't end up winning, you'd be handing this vampiric lord everything he needs to take over Skyrim, so yeah, it's pretty messed up. And that's even if you don't become a vampire lord in the storyline, which you also can do. However, you end up still having to kill Harkon anyway, since he doesn't really need you anymore, etc. So yeah, pretty powerful dude, unless you have like a 100 archery skill. And at 6, The Flash. Barry Allen, aka The Flash, is one of the former heroes who turned into a bloodthirsty vampire after Batman spread the vampiric plague throughout the world of Earth 43. He confronts Wally West from a different world and attempts to kill him, however before he can succeed, he was killed by Roy Harper from his world, who shot him with wooden arrows in the back. Because, you know, it's like wooden stakes. But even if he went down easily, that does not mean he wasn't powerful, since, you know, a vampire with the powers of the Flash, and not just any Flash, but Barry Allen, the literal Speed Force himself, basically. Yeah, I don't think you really need to see why that's absolutely terrifying. If he hadn't have been killed by Roy, he would have wiped out humanity, and I think that's the reason why he had to be killed, so that didn't happen, because there is literally no way to defend against that, especially since Batman, the one who always has a plan to stop Justice League members, was the one who turned him, so there's no one really to fight him now. Halfway through into number 5, Morbius. First being introduced in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 in 1971, Dr. Michael Morbius was a scientist born in Greece who became a Nobel Prize winning biochemist. He suffered from a blood disease and developed an experimental treatment in an effort to cure it. Its side effects though turned him into a vampire adjacent who needs to consume blood in order to survive, and gain typical vampire characteristics such as an aversion to sunlight and the powers of flight, enhanced strength, speed, and a healing factor. His overall appearance changed as well. He gained fangs, his nose flattened to appear more bat-like, and his skin became extremely pale, like me. But he has less of a nose and sharper teeth. Additionally, the victims of his bite would turn into living vampires themselves, which is absolutely nuts. This character also made an appearance in the 90s Spider-Man animated series, which is literally my favorite thing in the world. However, since it was a kid's show, he couldn't consume blood, so instead he consumed plasma. And his origin was changed as well, so it could kind of be intertwined with Peter's, when he spliced his DNA with Peter Parker's using the neurogenic recombinator, and then a bat jumped in front of the ray. And at 4, Dracula. In Marvel Comics, Count Dracula is a centuries-old vampire, sorcerer, and Transylvanian nobleman who rules from his namesake fortress known as Castle Dracula. He is the supreme ruler and world's most powerful vampire. Originally the Wallachian ruler Vlad the Impaler, he turned himself into a vampire following a battle with the invading Ottoman Empire, seeking revenge to, you know, destroy his enemies, because of course. Driven by a lust for power, companionship, and blood, his centuries of undead existence have brought him into conflict with vampire hunters, other immortals, and in the modern age, superheroes. Dracula has a vast network of loyal servants, cultists, brides, and minions who regularly assist him and attempt to resurrect him if he actually ends up dying. Recently, Dracula and his followers have taken up refuge in Chernobyl, creating a new vampire nation and bringing him into conflict with the Avengers. But given that like he's in essence the original vampire, I feel like he deserves to be on this list. Also, in the Marvel universe, his name is Vlad, which just makes me think of Vlad Plasmius from Danny Phantom, and I love Danny Phantom, so Getting close to the end, in at number 3, Ultraman. Ultraman was turned into a vampire by Batman, which doesn't really make sense because he's a Kryptonian, so like without kryptonite fangs, how did Batman pierce his skin? But you know, whatever. Ultraman, along with many Supermen of the multiverse, were kidnapped by the Prophecy to steal their powers, but they were freed by the Justice Incarnate. Later on, Ultraman confronted Wally West from a different world along with the Flash and attempted to kill him, but Wally managed to knock him down with his super speed fist and hold him down with dozens of wooden stakes. And while he seemingly was defeated by those wooden stakes, I don't think you need an explanation as to why a Superman with vampire powers is a bad idea. Okay, that's horrifying. Although this does beg the question, does it cancel out like the whole sun powers thing, since like vampires are weak to sunlight but Superman uses the yellow sun to get his powers? Or is it just like that a Kryptonian vampire is double weak to a red sun? Because he's already double weak to a red sun, but does that mean that like he doesn't really have powers? I don't know. It's an interesting debate that I believe you should have in the comments, but respectfully. Can't believe I'm saying that, because no one's gonna listen. Who am I kidding? Penultimately, in at number 2, the Alpha Vampire. In the world of Supernatural, the Alpha Vampire was the very first vampire and basically father of all other vampires. He was one of the Alpha monsters captured and interrogated by Crowley and Castiel in their efforts to locate Purgatory. He escaped Crowley's prison though and set up a new nest in North Dakota, and then Montana. He was later tracked down for his blood for the weapon to defeat the Leviathans, and ultimately recognizing a common enemy, he actually gave the Winchesters his blood without a fight. During an attack on the British Men of Letters though, the Alpha Vampire was killed by Sam Winchester with the cult, like the demon cult that can for some reason kill literally everything. I don't know how, but whatever. The Alpha Vampire is first glimpsed briefly flashing in the minds of his children as it's commanding them to recruit more of his army in like season 6. Nothing is known about this particular monster aside from the fact that its messages can be heard by all other vampires, and he can also just knock him out if he wants to. Dean ends up seeing this vision while he is infected, but yeah, the daddy of all other vamps? That's a powerful boy. Finally, in at number 1, Varet. Varet was a human or Gigantopithecus sorcerer that once lived in like 10,000 BC. Varet served in the cult of the Darkholders under Thusla Doom. Injured due to the actions of King Kull of Volscia, a dying Varet was transformed into a vampire by sorcerers of the pre-cataclysmic Atlantis, because he was born in Atlantis. He allegedly was the last survivor among the vampires created in Atlantis before the Great Cataclysm, and ruled over Earth's vampires. But in 1459, tired of his ages-long existence, Varet chose Dracula as his successor and Lord of Earth's vampires, and imparted much of his supernatural power to him by forcing Dracula to drink his blood. Varet then committed suicide by exposing himself to direct sunlight. However, years later, Marie Laveau, desperate for vampire blood, had kidnapped Doctor Strange's friend Morgana Blessing and his brother Victor. Strange was about to deliver the spell page to Laveau when reason reasserted itself and he forever banished the page from Earth, basically. Laveau, possessing the Darkhold though, invoked a spell contained within for resurrecting the Lord of the Vampires. So yeah, the very first vampire of all time in the Marvel Universe, who killed himself with sunlight and then was resurrected, and also made Dracula. Yeah, that's a number 1 for sure. There's no contest, even from the Alpha Vamp. No way.